The Gavin 6C is Detrim's inexpensive, full-function 6-channel computer radio. Let's take a look at how you'll put it to work. If you started out with a ready-to-fly package for your first model airplane, you've probably realized that it's time to upgrade to a computer radio. The Gavin 6C is Detrim's entry-level computer radio with some pretty nice features. In my book, RC Ground School, I spent a whole chapter talking about choosing a transmitter, and a while back I published a video on that same topic. Rather than go through all that again, I'll link to the video on the end card to this video and leave a link to my Amazon Kindle or paperback book in the description. What I will say is the Gavin 6C or its big brother, the Gavin 8C, are good candidates for the pilot who wants an inexpensive transmitter with inexpensive but capable receivers for a hangar full of small to medium-sized RC airplanes, as opposed to someone who plans on only owning one or two large, expensive models. It can get a bit frustrating to be constantly putting in receivers that cost as much or more than the model itself. Before we jump into programming the radio, I need to mention a couple of key features for these two radios. First is cost. As this is recorded, the Gavin 6C sells for less than $70 and the 8C for less than $90. A 6-channel sport receiver with integrated gyro system sells for about $25, and an 8-channel receiver with gyro sells for just over $30. Next is that both radios can be used to program the gyros in the receivers directly, so there's no need to adjust potentiometers with tiny screwdrivers or setting gyro functions with dip switches. The receiver supports 4 gyro flight modes: off, normal, aerobatic, and auto recovery. As with more expensive brand radios, the Gavin radios use a blend of direct sequence spread spectrum and frequency hopping spread spectrum techniques to minimize the opportunity for interference and dropped digital information sent to your model. As you'll see in this tutorial, the radio supports the normal programming functions such as wing type, channel switch assignments, expo, servo fine-tuning, channel mixes, and so on. In our programming example, we're going to be programming a Dynam Primo model with an MSR66A receiver, which includes the built-in gyro system. I'll go through all the basic steps, including assigning some switches, adjusting the gyros, selecting gyro modes used on the identified 3-position switch, and mixing in some rudder and aileron mix, as well as some elevator and flap mix. I'll also show you the fail-safe settings for the model. Some explanations will be necessary, but I'll try to keep them to the minimum required. Let's get started. So let's take a quick tour of the radio itself. In the back, we've got switch C, labeled SC. It's a 2-position spring-loaded switch that you would use for your trainer switch. Here is a 3-position switch. It's switch B, SB, and we're going to use this switch to control the gyro in the MSR66A receiver. Here is switch A. This is also a 2-position switch. We're going to assign that to the landing gear channel, and since our Primo has fixed landing gear, we'll plug our flaps into channel 5, and this then will become our flap switch. Over here, we have got switch D. It is also a 2-position switch, and we're going to assign that as the dual rate switch, and so that'll be on switch D. And then up here at the top, in the back, is switch E, which is also a 2-position switch, and we're going to use that as our throttle hold switch. So we can use that as a safety switch to keep the electric motor on our model from starting. Now across the front of the radio, it's pretty typical. We've got the gimbals with throttle and rudder here on the left, and ailerons and elevator on the right. It's a mode 2 setup radio. We've got digital trim switches for each of those 4 controls. On-off switch here in the middle, and then the computer controlling switches in the screen here on the bottom. And we'll have plenty of time to go through that in some detail, but just briefly, here is the ENT or enter switch. You'll do that to enter the various programming modes. Up and down are going to be used to select the mode that you want to go into, and then press enter to move into it. And then if there are selections within that mode, you can press the R+ or the L- button to make those selections. When the selections are done, you can press the EXT or exit switch and just press it to back out basically all the way to the main screen as you've finished your programming. On this side of the model, there is a port for a trainer cord if you're using it as either the master or the slave for training with a buddy box. And then across the back here is the battery compartment. In this case, I've got alkaline batteries in it. This will also take nickel metal hydride rechargeable batteries, and they also sell a 7.4 volt or 2-cell LiPo battery, and there's a little connector right down here in the corner for you to connect that to give you some of the advantages that you get from a LiPo battery powering your transmitter. Also in the back then, we've got the handle, and then of course on the top we've got the antenna. So let's start talking a little bit about the programming. So here we've got the Gavin 6C turned on. You can see the main display. We've got the name of the radio. We've got the battery capacity there at 87%. You can see we have the airplane icon there, which in airplane mode, we've got Model 1 selected. We're in the normal mode, and these 2 little rectangular boxes indicate either dual rates or normal rates, and I'll show you that as we get to that. Basically, the one little box will become half its size when we switch the dual rates on when we get to that part of the programming. Then you can also see that we have a couple of timers. The vertical rectangles here, horizontal ones here, represent where we are on the trim. As you move these trim buttons, the little be a visual indicator of how much trim you have placed in the radio. Now for this programming, we're going to follow a process, and we're going to assume that it's a new radio and a new model. And so we're going to start with the settings menu, then we'll move to the model setup, then we're going to bind and calibrate the radio to the model, and then we're going to go into the model parameters to finish up those selections that we need to do with the model connected to the radio via the radio link. So let's start by entering here. We'll use the down button to move to the system setup choice. We'll use enter to set that up. First choice is language. It's in English. That's what we want. We'll next move to calibration. Here you'll see the little arrow's got some little dotted lines leading to it, which means there's more to do. So we'll hit the calibration button, and then it says sticks full travel, and then set neutral and press enter. So we'll move the sticks around. We'll set them to neutral, and then we'll press enter. And now the calibration is complete. Now we're back on step number 2. We'll move down to step 3, stick mode. We want mode 2, and that's where it's set. Key volume, it's at 5. We can use the up or down to change the volume of the key clicks, and then we can change the tone. Let me let you hear that. So you can see that you can change the tone to whatever you're pleased with. Brightness, again, you can change the brightness of the screen. We've got that set so I can get a good visual for the recording. If you were out on a sunny day, you could change the brightness. Same thing, you can change the contrast. We're happy with that the way it is. We've got the screen illumination set to go off at a minute. There are choices here. You can bring it down to about 10 seconds, or you can leave it all the way on. For the purposes of our demonstration here today, we've got it set on a minute before it turns off. And so you may see it turn off once in a while during this demonstration. So we have the battery type illuminated now. We've got choices there. We can have nickel metal hydride, the 2-cell LiPo, or the alkaline, which is what I have in the radio, so we'll have that. That is important for the radio to be able to compute the battery power left in the transmitter, so you want to have those set properly. And then the About menu just basically says that we're on software version 2.3 and hardware version 2.0. So that's the About menu. So this will be a good time to just kind of back out, and we're going to use the Exit button to back out. And so now we're back at the main screen, and we've completed the settings menu. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the Model Set menu. So again, we'll enter, and we'll get into the primary selection screen. We'll go up to Model Set and go into there. Now model is set to number 1. If we move into there, we can move down through the various model settings that we have in memory. There are 30 of them in this model. In this case, we want Model 1, so we're going to select Model 1. Then we're going to move down and name the model, so we're going to go in there. Now the little cursor is above the M, and we're going to call this Primo 1. So we'll find the P. There's the P. We're going to press down, moves the cursor over to the O. So with the cursor over the O, we're going to go up to the R. Again, press down to change the cursor. Now we're over the D. We're going to go find the I. Again, move the cursor, find the M. And then last, we'll find the O. And so we're going to leave this as Primo 01. So we're done with that. So we press the button, and now we've got it named. Next, we're going to go move down to Airplane. We've got choices of airplane, helo, and quadcopters or drones, and so we're going to leave it at Airplane. And then we're going to go into Function Set, and we're going to have several choices here to deal with. So we've got throttle hold, and I mentioned to you that we were going to put the throttle hold up here on the top on this switch, which is switch SE. And so to do that, we can just move the buttons, and so you can see that it says that we're set for switch SE already. I've got the acrobatic fly mode off. I've got the trainer switch, which I mentioned before is going to be up here at the top, and that's switch SC. So this is where I'm assigning that switch. It's on SC. The mode switch is what controls the gyro in the receiver, and so that's going to be up here on switch B. So I've got that set switch B. Again, to change that, you just press the up and down button to assign the switch that you want to use. The aileron dual rates is going to be the switch up here. Get it down here. This is switch number D. And so I've got that set for dual rates, elevator for dual rates on switch D, rudder for dual rates on switch D. And so all of those are going to be the same because I want them to go in and out of dual rates at the same time. Now the landing gear, I wanted this switch up here, which is switch A, so I've got that assigned to switch A. Aux 1 is switch B, which is what's going to be controlling the gyros in the receiver. And so we go now up, we're up to the top, so we've worked through the entire function set and made all those choices, and so we can back out of that. Next we go down to the trainer setup. We can use this as a trainer in a buddy box situation. I'm not going to mess with that today. Failsafe is the next thing. That's number 6 in our list of things to do. So I'm going to go into failsafe. And so the aileron, I'm going to go into the aileron. And then when you've got set identified or highlighted, you can either turn the failsafe on, which is where it is now, or set it to servo hold. Now, servo hold will keep the servo where it was when you lost power. And that's probably not necessarily a good thing, and at least for the ailerons. And so we're going to go to fail safe, and then we press the down button, and then we get to a place where we can use the up or down plus buttons over here to make fine adjustments. So if we've got a little bit of trim built into the airplane, then we could simulate that trim in fail-safe mode so the airplane would fly straight and level. So that's what we're going to be, that's how we would do that. And so we're going to come back and do that later if in fact we need to do that. So we'll exit this, we'll go down to elevator, enter elevator. Again, I've got it set to fail-safe and 0, that's where I want it. We'll back out of that, go to throttle. I've got that set at fail-safe, and then in this case I've got it set to -100, and so in other words I want the throttle to cut if I lose contact with the model, and so I've got that set. We'll back out of there. Rudder, I want it in fail-safe at a neutral position, which is the 0, so back out of there. Gear, fail-safe and 0. Again, I want the flaps to come up, so that's what this setting will give me. Back out of that, go down to the next one, aux 1. We've got fail-safe and 0. We got nothing in aux 1 other than controlling the gyro, so that shouldn't be an issue really wherever you set it. So we move down next, and now we're back up at the top, so we've worked through each of those 6 choices in our fail-safe menu. We'll back out of that, and then we'll move down to the next item, which is timer set. So with our timer set, we're going to select that, go in there, and so this case we've got 3 choices. We can have an up timer that counts up, or a down timer that counts down. So for timer number 1, I want a countdown timer. Move to the next one. Control switch, I want it on the throttle. Throttle position is set at -85. Basically what that means is anytime the throttle is above 15% of the throttle throw, then the timer will be running. And so that's what that is, and that's what I want it to be. I think that was the default. The timer in minutes, I want to fly this airplane for 5 minutes and 30 seconds. And that's the timer setup. So I'm going to back out of that, and then I'm going to go down to timer number 2. And in this case, I think I want a count up timer, and so I'm going to change the choice to count up, and that way I can see how long I actually flew. So if the timer went off and I still had to fly around for to get it back to land, I can have a sense of how long I actually flew. So timer 1 gives me a warning, and then timer 2 gives me my actual flight time. So I'm going to go down to control switch, is going to be the throttle. Again, anytime the throttle is above 15%, I want the timer to be running, so that is set at 85 and -85. The timer in minutes is going to be 0 since it's a count up timer, and the timer in seconds is going to be 0 since it's a count up timer. And so that's done, so I'm going to press the exit button and exit out of timer number 2, and then I'm going to go down. I've got one more thing to consider in this model set menu. I'm on step 8 of 9, and now it's reset mode. Reset allows me to clear the model or clear the radio back to factory resets, and I'm not going to do that, so I've got it set to non-active. So I'm going to exit the model set menu and get back to my main screen here. And at this point, we're going to bring the airplane in and do the binding and calibrating, because the model parameters menu, we're going to need the airplane for it to work. Okay, so our first step in binding the receiver is going to be to plug the airplane in, and I'm working just off the camera range there, but I'm just plugging a battery in. Remember, I have the propeller off. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the radio on to make sure that I've got the Primo model selected. And I can see that down here that I have it selected, so I'm going to turn the radio back off. Now the next thing I'm going to do is, if you can see down here, the two little lights are flashing very rapidly. And so what I'm going to do now is just use a long screwdriver and press that bind button for about 2 or 3 seconds until it starts to flash slowly. Now again, I know I've got the Primo set here, so I'm going to pull the trainer switch up, that's the spring-loaded switch, and I'm going to turn the radio on. And so with that, you can see now that I have bound the radio to the model. The lights have stopped flashing, and you can hear that there's power going to the various flight controls. The next thing I'm going to need to do is calibrate the throttles. And if I try to turn the radio on with the throttle out of the off position, it's not going to go forward. That's a safety precaution. But I do need to get the throttle up high before I plug the receiver in. So in this case, I'm going to unplug the receiver from the battery. Now I'm going to turn the radio on. I'm going to move the throttle up to high. And now I'm going to plug the battery into the airplane to calibrate the receiver in terms of the throttle throws. Again, the propeller is off, so it's not going to spin, and even if it does, it's not going to hurt anything. So you heard the 2 little beeps that said I'm in programming mode. I read the throttle, I pushed the throttle all the way down, and then you heard the cell count tones, and it's ready to go. And so I've got everything set now electronically between the transmitter and the receiver. Now I need to set the specifics in that last menu that we're going to go through. So our primary menu that we have left to go through is the model parameters menu. And so we'll enter to go to that. It's highlighted, so we'll enter it. And so we've got the reverse set is the first item. So we're going to go into this. And here we've got everything set to normal. And the airplane is just right over here beside me. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the ailerons right and left to see that they're moving the way that I want them, and they are. So that's good. So we're going to go down. Channel 2 is the elevator, and so I'm going to move the elevator up and down, and I look and I see that that is backwards. So I'm going to reverse that, and so now when I try it, it's moving the right direction. So I'm going to go down to channel 3, which is the throttle, and since the motor's not running, I know that's right, because I've got the throttle stick down. Channel 4 is the rudder, and so we'll go here. And the rudder's backwards too, so I'm going to go change the rudder to reverse. And now it's moving the right way. Go down to channel 5, and that one is my flaps. And so what I want the flap switch, which is I'm using here, let me slide this down. I want the flaps down when the switch is down, and right now the switch is down and the flaps are up. So I'm going to need to change that to reverse as well. And so now the flaps are down and the switch is down, and up, the flaps are up and the switch is up. Move down again. Channel 6 is the, I'm going to leave on normal because that's the controls to the gyro. So we've gone through all of the reverse settings, so at this point we're just going to move to the main part of the parameters menu. Next one we're going to go down to endpoint adjustments. And endpoint adjustments have 2 categories per channel, low and high, and that's basically left and right. So it's not like low rates or anything. And so for most of these I'm going to start out with them at 100%. I want the servo moving through the full range. And then you can make changes as necessary. A couple of examples might be if you had an EDF type of jet that didn't have a rudder, and it was real sensitive on the steering. You could change the endpoint adjustments on this electronically to kind of settle it down so it steered more easily. And I've also run into a couple of airplanes with electronic landing gear that liked endpoint adjustments at the 115 to 120% range for them to work properly. So endpoint adjustments you do run across once in a while that you have to make changes on. Here's high and low for throttle, high and low for the rudder, and then channel 5, I did make a change to the endpoint adjustment. So you can see channel 5, I've got about 94 on each one, and that was because when I had the flaps fully extended or fully retracted, there was some pressure on the servo and you could hear it buzzing. And so I changed the endpoint adjustments on channel 5 a little bit to so the servo wouldn't always be pushing against the whatever was causing it to buzz. And so we worked our way down again, 100% high and low for channel 6, and we've gone through all 12 settings of the endpoint adjustments. We've really made changes only to one, so we'll back out. Next is subtrim. The subtrim menu allows you to change the trim on each of your channels to get a very precise trimming of the airplane. Now the goal is to get the airplane trimmed as good as possible using mechanical trim. And then if you want to really fine-tune it, you can use the sub-trims to cause the servo to move just a very, very small amount. And so in this case, I've got it trimmed up pretty nice mechanically, and I haven't made any changes to sub-trim. So we're going to back out of the sub-trim menus. You have the opportunity to change the trim on each of the 6 channels. The next step down is stick curve. And basically this is expo. So let's go in here. And so you've got the endpoint adjustments at 100%. We're going to go down to expo. And I like to fly with a little expo. And if you look over here, you can see that there's a diagonal line going from the lower left to the upper right. And that basically means that the servo is going to move in a linear fashion. And I like a little slop around the center, a little less impact on the flight controls for movement of the stick in the center. And so I'm going to change the expo, and I'm going to go up to 15%. And so now you can see in this drawing that the line has a little flatness there around the center, which means when I move the controls, it's not going to move as much in the center, but by the time I get to the full range of the servo, it'll have full control input. So that's the aileron curve. I'll press enter and it'll move me to the elevator curve, and I want to do the same thing. I'm going to go put up to 15%. Enter to the rudder curve, same thing, I'm going to match that. (15% there, and then these numbers here, basically, you may have seen them changed as I move the expo. You can fine-tune the curve, but this point I'm just happy with the way it is, and so press enter again. I'm back to aileron. I've done my expo, and so I'm going to back out of this. Next one down is throttle curve. That's linear. I want it to be linear, so I'm not going to mess with that. Throttle hold is the next switch. You remember I said that I was going to put the throttle hold on switch E up here on the top of the radio, and so with that throttle hold on, I wanted it 0, so I wanted to cut the throttle off. Move down to choice number 7 in this menu is the mix set, and I do want to do a couple of mixes, so I'm going to enter the mix set. The first mix is programming mix, which I get to choose. Then there's the delta mix if I had a delta airplane, or a V-tailed mix if I had a V-tailed airplane. Since I don't, I'm not going to mess with those. I'm going to leave them off, and I'm going to enter here the program mix. So on program mix 1, I've got it set off, so I want to use program mix 1, so I'm going to turn it on. The master, I want the aileron, and it happens to be set to aileron. I can change that by moving down to whatever flight control I want the main one to be. In this case, I want the aileron. So when I move the aileron, the slave will move with it. And so on the slave, I've got the rudder. So this means that I can get a little help with rudder on a coordinated turn through the radio And so I'm kind of cheating a little bit using this function to add a little rudder during the turn while the ailerons are deflected. I move down to the rate, and I only want it about 15%. So that's rate 1, that's going left. Rate 2 is going right, 15%. And now I'm back to the top, so I've got my mix 1 set. The next mix I want to do is mix number 2, so I'm going to go into mix number 2. I'm going to turn that on, and in this case I want the master switch to be the landing gear switch, switch number A. And remember, this airplane isn't got landing gear. I've got my flaps set on this particular channel, and so I want to mix elevator in with the flaps, because when I don't do that, the airplane pitches up pretty significantly, especially at higher speeds. So I've got the gear as the master, I've got the slave as the elevator, so when I lower the flaps, the elevator is going to move, and it's going to move 30%. Now that's pretty big, but it had a pretty big pitch up when I flew it without the mix. And so I've got the rate set for 30, and then rate number 2 is 0 for when the flaps are up. So I've gone through my mix 2, I've got that all set, and so I'm going to exit mix number 2, and those are the only mixes I want to set. So I'm going to move out of my mix menu, and then continue to move out of my mix menu, and then down again, and I've got servo delay. Now, servo delay will allow me to cause the servo to move slower than it would normally would, and for this particular model, I'm not going to mess with servo delay. Just know that it's there. And then the auto stability set, and this is where we're going to set up our gyro in the receiver, in the MSR66A receiver. So you can see it's got little broken lines, so there's more choices, so we'll go into that. And so we're going to go into switch set, and here's what we're going to do with position number 1. We want the gyro off, and so you can see it's off. We can set it to normal or auto recovery. We want gyro off on position 1. Normally it's a good idea with electronic gyros to have an off channel selected, so if it starts to get funky on you, you can just turn it off and fly it without the gyro. Then if I move this to the center position, the 3-position switch where I have the gyro control set to, you see it change down here, and I've got that normal. So that's going to be the normal operation. That's where I'm going to fly it. It'll help me out on bumpy days. And then pit number 3, I'm going to go down to, and this is the one I want for auto recovery. And so again, I can make changes here, but this one I want auto recovery, so if I get really discombobulated flying the airplane, lose track of its orientation, I can just flick the switch to position number 3 and it will return to level flight, assuming of course that I have the altitude available to do that. So that's the settings for my gyro. Now I move down to roll gain. There's choices there. The direction here means which way the control is going to move, and so we've got 50 and 50 for angle and rate gain. Those are the defaults, and so I'm going to start there. I'm not going to mess with any of these, and so we'll back out of this. We can move down to pitch gain. Again, enter that. The direction again is in reverse. If you change it, it'll be normal, but basically it's just going to be a matter of the impact of the direction of the control when you move these numbers. And since we've got them set at 50, the defaults, we're just going to leave them there for now. And then we'll back out of this. We go down to yaw gain. It works the same way. Roll offset, I'm just leave it at the default. And so if it, I'm thinking what that means is that if it senses more than 5 degrees of bank, it's going to start providing input. Pitch offset, same thing. I have that set at 6, so those will be kind of the boundaries for the pitch and roll for the gyro. And then mounting, I took the wing off and looked inside, and the mounting of the receiver is, you know, with the bottom down and the front facing forward, and so I've got it mounting set for up. I've got choices with this receiver, however. If I happen to have it upside down, like stuck to the bottom of the wing or something, I could do that. You can hear things moving because it doesn't like the way the gyros are sensing things. I could set it on its right side. I could set it on its left side, but we've got it set right side up. And so with right side up, we've got everything back to where it's supposed to be. And then last, the wing, and we've got a normal wing. We have got choices on the wing for a delta wing or a V-tail wing. Of course, this is just a normal airplane wing. And so now we've programmed our flight controller completely, at least within the desired control range that we think will work for us. And if we find that we want to make changes, we can come back to this menu and make the appropriate adjustments during the course of after the flight. So we'll back out of this, and I can see up here that I'm on choice 9 of 9 menus. So I've worked my way through the airplane parameter menu. I go back to the main menu choices, and then back to the main screen. And so you can see here I've got my timers with 5:30 here. We're ready to go. I don't have the propeller on. I've preached that, I know, but I'll give you a chance to see the timer start to work. You'll hear the motor start. You see that I've got it on hold, so I've got the hold switch. I turn the hold. It goes into normal. And if I start the thing, now you can see that the timer is starting to count down. Timer number 2 is starting to count up. We've got the model name, the fact that it's airplane, the trim indicators, and right now it looks like my alkaline batteries are at 76%. So that's programming. It went together pretty easily. Everything makes sense. And so let's go for a couple of closing comments. As I hope you saw, the Gavin 6C computer radio is a full-function computer radio that's easy to program. The various menu items are placed in submenus that are easy to understand and make sense of. The controls are easy to manipulate, and making selections and adjusting settings is easy too. The ability to set the gyro system that's embedded in the MSR66 receiver, as well as some other Detrim receivers, sets the Gavin computer radios apart from the crowd. Speaking of receivers, the cost of Detrim's receivers, either with or without the embedded gyro system, is very reasonable. Together with the cost of the transmitters themselves, pairing a Gavin 6C or 8C computer radio with these receivers is a very economical way to get started in the hobby with an upgrade path that won't require replacing the electronics you've already purchased. Again, to learn more about making a smart transmitter purchasing decision, please consider my book, RC Ground School, available on Amazon, and my computer radio video on my YouTube channel. I'll link the book below and the video on the screen in just a few seconds. Hey, if you found this video helpful, please click on the thumbs up icon below and consider subscribing to the RCPlaneviews.com channel. Click on the bell icon to be notified when I post new videos. Thanks for watching.